9th public. We will call to order the November 9th Public Works Committee meeting. We'll do a roll call. Jenny?
Jenny Wook, Council.
Bob Himes, Council.
Jeff Langhelm, Public Works Director.
Eric Hume.
Brent Ward, staff.
Maureen
Franix,
Whitaker,
council.
staff. Sorry. Mo here, staff.
And it looks like we have a visitor with us, Jennifer.
Jennifer Sailman, Transportation Solutions.
Thank you. All right, so we need a approval of the October 12th minutes.
Move
I
to
move to
approve
approve.
the, go ahead, Jenny.
Go ahead, I'll second.
Okay. I'll make the motion then. Move to approve the minutes of the October meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, we don't have any old business scheduled. The first item of new business is the ADA transition plan review. We'll have a presentation by Transportation Solutions. So take it away, Jennifer.
All right. Let's see. Hopefully you can see my presentation screen now.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for having today. Got some perfectly timed music there. All right, so today I'll be briefly going over our ADA self-evaluation and transition plan for the public right-of-way. This presentation is 10 minutes and we would love to take questions at the end. So it's a brief presentation. And Trent and I have been working together on this with Maureen and other city staff. So first, what is an ADA self-evaluation and transition plan? And this is a document that helps agencies move towards compliance with the 1990s Americans with Disabilities Act to prohibit discrimination against people with disabilities. And the Department of Justice outlines 4 required components of such a plan. First is identification of barriers, physical and communicative, that limit accessibility. The plan also needs to describe the methods to make facilities, programs, and services accessible. The plan needs to have specificity in providing a schedule to make the modifications to move towards compliance and improve access. And the plan also needs to identify those responsible, and it needs to be a public official with the advocacy to move this through financial implementation and progression as the years pass. The plan is a federally mandated requirement of the ADA, and self-evaluation is part of this plan, but it's not the only piece. Removal of barriers needs to be part of that. And the removal of barriers deals with existing facilities, and it also mandates that new facilities are built to the most current standards. Another requirement for the plan is that the plan is now required by WSDOT for grant eligibility. WSDOT requires that certified acceptance agencies with 50 or more employees have this plan, and that is to continue to be eligible for federal highway funding. And the city of Gig Harbor is such a certified acceptance agency. So this plan that we are provided to you today is a phase 1 of a ADA transition plan effort. It is focused on select public right-of-way facilities. So what we started out with is looking at the city's curb ramps. We evaluated them based on existing city efforts and some quality control checking that I performed. We also looked at how to prioritize the curb ramp barriers, and we also have a cost and schedule plan to remove barriers. We also did some evaluation of existing data related to pedestrian crossings through the city's GIS database. This phase also has looked at some required administrative roles, policies, and procedures. On the roles side, we have designation of an ADA 504 coordinator, and that person deals with responding to grievances and being a general resource for ADA related items. And also we have designated an official responsible for the plan's implementation. We also have our ADA grievance procedure formalized. We have our public notice under the ADA made available that guarantees that we will not discriminate based on disability. And we also have our accessible pedestrian signal policy set up so that the city has a way to move forward with expanding their accessible pedestrian signals into the future. So I mentioned prioritization of curb ramp barriers, and if you had a chance to read through the plan, you would see that we took a multi-layered approach to this. One item of prioritization is whether an ADA ramp is compliant or not. And non-compliance can be on a spectrum of severity, from very non-compliant ramps to ramps that have a slight technical non-compliant feature, but they're otherwise functional or usable by the public. So we take that range of severity into consideration. But we also look spatially at where ramps are. And so high priority ramps to be upgraded are those that are near planned transportation projects that the city already intends to work on, as well as ramps that are on pedestrian trails or transit routes. And third, we also looked at the city's comprehensive plan for their centers of local importance to try and find ramps that provide the most access to the most services. We also are aware that the city's annual pavement maintenance and repair program can help remove barriers. And so this program requires curb ramp upgrades be integrated into projects. And our plan includes an appendix with that Department of Justice guidance regarding when ramp upgrades are triggered by alterations and maintenance. Last, we have the barrier removal implementation. We provide cost estimates for removing the 416 identified curb ramp barriers, and we schedule that barrier removal in terms of a 6-year and a 25-year horizon. We also include a review of funding sources, both existing and potential, to see where the city can utilize funds, including grant resources, to remove barriers. This project, you're coming in kind of at a near to end point for this phase. We started in mid-August with our project kickoff and worked through self-evaluation in September and early October. In October, we also launched online surveys to gain some feedback from the public about barriers they experience and which barriers would be important to be removed before others. We've taken that into consideration as we developed the financial implementation plan and prioritization that is kind of the core heart of the plan. And we are presenting to you today to get your comment. We also will be uploading the draft plan for public comment, for wider public comment through the end of the month. And we will present again to City Council with a public hearing opportunity on November 22nd. Once the public comment period wraps up at the end of November, I'll be consolidating those responses for documentation in an appendix to the plan, and we anticipate adoption by City Council in mid-December. With our removal implementation, we wanted to get some cost estimates, and we've provided a range for an average cost per ramp in 2021 dollars at $15,000. Now, this could be up or high regarding the technical requirements of the ramp that's being upgraded, or if that's actually something called a blended transition, which is not actually a curb with a ramp, but more of a practically slopeless transition from a pedestrian path into a roadway crossing. So prices can vary, but this cost estimate does include survey and mapping, design, construction management, construction, and a contingency built into it. So that's forming our total curb ramp program cost estimate around 6.2 million. Now, this can seem like a large sum since it's right now just for curb ramps, but the city is making impressive progress. The 2022 pavement maintenance and repair program has 500,000 dedicated to curb ramps out of a total program budget of 2.5 million. So that will be a good amount of progress in 2022. We have looked at how to meet a goal of addressing ramps by 2053 with this 25-year horizon. And if that averages about 16 ramps per year, we're looking at about $1 million through the 6-year TIP and future pavement maintenance and repair program. And then into that long horizon, the remaining 4.74 million. And so this is a plan to move the city towards removing barriers at a reasonable pace. An important aspect of ADA transition planning is public engagement, and therefore we have actively worked with local ADA organizations to promote our online surveys and seek feedback from the public. And public comment, this meeting is public. The city council meeting will have the public hearing opportunity and public comment on the draft plan through the rest of this month. And my remaining tasks are incorporating your feedback, city council's feedback, and remaining public comment into the final plan. So future phases reflect that this is an ongoing transition, literally, and that there are other public right-of-way and other city facilities that still need to be looked at into the future for ADA compliance. ADA includes sidewalks, driveway interface with sidewalks, fully accessible pedestrian signal systems. So that's not just having a push button, but also vibro, tactile, and audible system components, and also accessible parking. Then you also have building facilities, parks and trail facilities, and then the programmatic side of whether services, programs, and activities have accessibility built into them. So that was the quick, very brief survey of or summary of what we've been doing. We welcome you to fill out our online survey options. We have a map-enabled version where you can even pinpoint locations where you've experienced barriers. And we also have a screen reader-friendly version. And so thank you for your time, and we would love to take questions. And I can move back to I can move back to the financials page if that helps here.
Thank you very much for that. Councilmember Himes?
Yeah, I had a question on the surveys. The intent of the surveys is to get feedback from the public. Is it relative to the process, or is it relative to specific locations of ramps with various issues? That is, for example, a curb, no ramp being the worst case, etc. I'm interested in that. I think you have a very good process here, by the way, a very structured process, particularly in terms of analysis and prioritization. I think it's great. Given that, I'm struggling a little bit with where the public comment is going to feed into this thing.
Right. So to address the first question of what the survey is trying to gather, we have a survey that is intended to, number one, gather information about barriers, as that can help us know which barriers stand out to members of the public more than others. We also have provided space for some help in seeing if there's any consensus about where it's important to remove barriers. And we had some generic categories here related to unpaved pedestrian routes, beach access, parking, or paved pedestrian routes. The focus of this survey was to keep it on the public right of way, but to try to start gathering information that could be useful for future phases. And we also asked them to prioritize which barriers they wanted removed before others. And my evaluation of the 24 survey responses we got through the end of October, there was a clear trend for missing curb ramps being highest priority, and paved pedestrian routes were the clear high priority score. That's a small cohort, but we'll see with more surveys if that trend continues. And we did create an open-ended area for any other responses, and there were a handful of responses asking about how the ADA community is involved in the process. And so that's something for the city's project team to consider for future phases, whether public engagement should expand. And so when it comes to how to incorporate the public comment into the plan or into the prioritization, best practices do say to take public comment, especially public comment from members of the ADA community or those who serve or provide services to the ADA community, that those are in some ways kind of the easy ways to figure out which projects are of high value because they meet perceived barriers to the public. So it is up to the city to decide how they want to respond and or address public comment. The city does have merit considering they have planned transportation projects, and removing barriers as part of a corridor project is efficient and a wise stewardship of the city's funds. However, it is up to the city to decide in what way they want to use the public feedback they receive.
Okay, I think you've answered that question, and now I'm looking at the priorities that would be set using the criteria that you had in the paper, which I thought were very good, by the way. And most of those criteria, I'll bet the average person would have no idea what you're talking about, centers of local importance and all that stuff, and why that moves things up the priority list, at least according to this scheme. I'm still struggling a little bit, called how to reconcile that. And my experience has been, when we open this up, there will be an email campaign, I'm sure, to vote for certain places that certain people want to have fixed. And we're going to have to somehow reconcile that with the criteria that's in this paper, I believe. In other words, for example, proximity to transit was one of the items that was in there. There's a whole series of them, okay, that you had in there. So I throw that out as a question, and maybe it's a question to ourselves called how are we going to deal with that? So I will stop right there, but I think it's going to be a challenge, a little bit of a challenge called, what's the priority based on best professional practice, which I think is what's in this paper. And then there's the other side of the equation is from a a citizen perspective, particularly a politically active citizen perspective, what's the most important thing? And how do we reconcile that? So reconciling 461 curbs is going to be a lot of fun. Our ramps is going to be a lot of fun. And another good reason Jenny's going to handle that next year, right, Jenny?
Yes, and actually I'm going to Heron's Key. Well, actually I'm going to Zoom with Heron's Key on Monday to promote the survey. And so they will have some written surveys there that they will be taking.
Okay, okay. But it's still going to come back to the city to make the decision.
Yeah.
And do we go with the criteria that's laid out in the paper here, or do we always shift to the voice of, quote, the customer?
One possible tool that could help, since when there's a lot of public engagement and perhaps the public is perceiving a safety concern, or the city's trying to mitigate risk as well, is right now the prioritization is trying to align and be efficient with already existing city programs through transportation projects and the pavement maintenance and repair program. But one possible tool could be a dedicated ADA curb ramp program with a set amount of funds each year that can be geared towards working with these locations that are very request, or there's a lot of public request or feedback or activism for. That's one possible solution. Another possible solution would be to map and see of the barriers that the public comments on, in what ways do those barriers align with these other prioritization elements. So if you can find a curb ramp barrier that is the city, that the public is highly concerned about removing, and if it also meets these other priorities, then that you could say is, all right, we're hitting all of these boxes, or checking off all these boxes. That's the idealistic answer, but perhaps a dedicated fund to address public requests, that could be a way to address ramps that don't fall into this prioritization scheme.
Okay, yeah, I won't belabor this topic any further. But like I say, when you throw in all of that and then throw in grant availability and synergy with other projects relative to design and construction costs, this thing starts getting very big in terms of the task that's at hand. And like I say, I will leave that with next year's Public Works Committee.
Thank you, council member.
I had a question about the parking. That seemed to score pretty high, at least, I mean, 23 or 24 respondents isn't a very large pool to go by, but can you speak a little to what your thoughts are on trying to meet the perceived need for more parking? Accessible parking.
Okay, so the responses I looked through so far, there were a number of comments that were parking related, and I think that it is a challenge for me at this point to comment on it, because I don't know the city's existing inventory of ADA parking or accessible parking currently. So I don't have data to comment on, how many ADA stalls does the city have? Is the city, I kind of feel unable to comment on whether in what manner the public feedback is accurately representing the availability of accessible parking.
Well, yeah, well, maybe Jeff or Trent could speak to that. You know, I don't believe we have enough accessible parking, on-street parking available. So do you happen to have the total of accessible on-street parking that's available?
ADA parking that's on street?
Yes.
I don't have that number, but I think it's below 10. We have more ADA stalls in public parks, but very few in public right of way.
And I might add, just to put some perspective on that particular item, accessible parking in the right of way. We're hearing and seeing from the responses to the survey that is important to people. This plan, as it's currently proposed, is focusing strictly on pedestrian ramps in the right of way. But I think what the survey is telling us is for a future phase, and it could be whenever council would like, it could be next year, we need to then start looking at adding in accessible parking stalls into this plan to be, considered. Where do we need them? How many do we need? And start zeroing and nailing that down and adding it to our transition obligations. Because it is an element of the ultimate transition plan. And this is just phase one, we're calling it, but step one.
Is there a percentage of AD or accessible parking for best practices in a city?
I was going to say there is the 2011 Public Right-of-Way Accessibility Guidelines, nicknamed PROWAG. It's not technically regulation, but it's considered best practices. It does outline the proportion of accessible on-street parking to regular on-street parking. So there is guidance on that. I don't have it up, but I can provide that if that's of curiosity to you, council member.
At some point, yes, I think it would be important.
Well, maybe we can get that when we make the final presentation to city council and have that information. We can have a better idea where we are today and what that PROAG guidance is.
Thank you.
And is there a certain standard, like when the Welcome Plaza was built, the way that ADA parking stall was put in is it was kind of set back a little bit. I mean, as far as people with disabilities that are using a wheelchair, it's the being able to open the door all the way to get the wheelchair or lower a ramp. Those are, I mean, do those specifications need to be?
We might have lost Councilmember Franich. We can wait till he hopefully is able to re-log in, but I can say that we do have standards for what ADA parking stalls in the right-of-way, parallel parking stalls look like. And both at the Welcome Plaza, Scansey Park, that ADA parking stall is ADA compliant, meets the standards, as does the ADA parking stall at Ansage Waterfront Park. So, and when we do come across opportunities to add parallel parking in the right of way, in most instances, we do try and add ADA stalls. We did not do that unless Trent, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the new parallel parking stalls we added at Ed and Boat as part of the Roundabout project, I don't think any of those were ADA stalls.
No, they're not.
Okay, they're just standard stalls. Okay. Mayor,
Yeah, so when you say 416 curb ramps, 6-year in horizon, I hope the horizon means 6 years and more, because that's 69 ramps per year. That's, I don't know how we could ever achieve that.
Let's see.
I mean, we can do our best, but I
well, you
mean,
can, yes, Jennifer just brought up our schedule. It's the 25-year horizon is where
Okay.
is what we're looking at.
okay, do you, if, on that other sheet, if you don't mind somewhere, if this ever gets passed around more, that it would say 6-year and 25-year horizon. So it doesn't make it seem like we don't fulfill the needs that we're trying to achieve. Is that possible?
I think that's on page 5, Jennifer.
Yeah, and Mayor,
Yeah,
just
right there. Yeah, we'll go back one,
Page 5.
right there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I just don't want us to be already in the rear. So if it said 6-year and 25-year horizon, I would appreciate that.
Okay. And when I look at this and check my math here, I'm gonna go back to this screen because this is actually the 6-year 2022 through 2027 is these two numbers. And that's 6 years. And then beyond that, 28 to 53, that's an additional 25 years. So that becomes a 31-year period total.
Okay,
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
and
Jennifer,
these, I'm sorry, if I might add in here, these are horizons or lengths of time that are at the city's discretion. They're at council's discretion. So we've proposed, just in looking at our numbers and what we've done in the past, is where we kind of landed on this, hey, 25 years at 16 ramps per year would get us compliant. If that's, and that in today's dollars is $250,000 a year. If council or the committee would like to lengthen that, that's perfectly fine. If you'd like to shorten it. So there's flexibility. It's just the bottom line with the regulation is that we need to propose a best intended plan for achieving compliance. So it could be 30 years, it could be 1 year, it could be, I hate to say, 100 years. Anyway, we tried to pick something we thought was representative of what the city's been accomplishing in recent years.
okay, and then another question. So X many years ago, probably 5, maybe 6, they changed with the yellow ramps that were a little bit more usable for people that were partially blind. And it was a trial. It was a trial to see how they would go. And I think they kind of look like they've got dots and they're, and I think they work well, but it was going to be a trial if we liked it. Is that what the city now plans to move forward? I'm sure you've probably gotten enough years of feedback to know if that yellow different style, which I think is good for people that have trouble seeing. That's one reason why we went with that. Is that going to be the standard going forward?
The bumps or domes you talked about, those are truncated domes. Those are a federal requirement. But the color is, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, the color requirement is not necessarily yellow, but it's a contrasting color to the adjacent surfaces.
Well, I think
So
it's
there's
good.
flexibility on the color.
Yeah, I think it's good to be consistent, and it lets people, even if you're colorblind, you're going to be seeing a different color. So that's
Right.
better. So I think it works.
I just want to be clear, we now have 2 different colors or 2 different standards we use for those truncated domes. One is the yellow and one is the cast iron. The cast iron has a longer life, and that's why we're allowing those, and we think it's more appropriate in some areas of town instead of having the bright yellow. The bright yellow fades, the bright yellow pulls up and cracks. And so it also gets shows dirt a lot more. And so but after it's in place and installed for a few years, it starts to be discolored and then becomes a maintenance item. So and the cast iron does not. So that's why we're allowing both, but for city projects, we're in most cases, though not all cases, dictating that we have the cast iron truncated domes.
Good.
I didn't see who had their hand up first, so I'll start with Councilmember Wook.
Thank you. So this is for the curb ramp barrier removals only. And if we have 31 years to get these done, is there any other portion of accessibility that is going to be a requirement? For example, maybe accessible parking or something else, sidewalks, driveways, are these going to be at the same time? I'm trying to figure out if we spread these out over 30 years, then are we likely to have some other requirements in here as well?
Yes, all of the requirements are in existence as we speak. But the phasing in of the development of a plan of how to address them, there's the federal government has been more than patient. I mean, we're 32 years into this requirement already, but they're being very patient. And in this state, Washington State DOT has described that, hey, cities, you need to get your plan in place to address ramps and then further develop it to address sidewalks, driveways, APS parking, buildings, parks, etc.
I'm just trying to
yes.
figure out the money part of this, the funding part of this. If we want to do them closer together to get this funding done for this project to be ready for other projects that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, no, it is something where we should look at funding for curb ramps and be ready for adding to that funding for the other parts of the facilities that we will have to bring up to compliance.
Yeah.
But right now, Jennifer, correct if I'm wrong, or Kurt, correct if I'm wrong, we don't have a schedule for the remaining facilities that are listed here. We just know the curb ramps are the starting point, but we will have to add the remaining facilities at some point in the future, but we don't have a schedule for that yet.
And who sets that schedule?
Well, it could be the federal government, or it could be the Department of Justice because of a complaint the city receives. If the city only looked at curb ramps between now and the next 31 years and we ignored sidewalks, driveway interfaces, parking, then we could get a claim action against us for not addressing these others. And then the Department of Justice could come in and say, City of Gig Harbor, you're now required for the next 25 years to make sure all your sidewalks are ADA compliant. So we need to make sure that we continue to show forward progress. That's a key. And so setting up a plan that shows forward progress with the curb ramps is the starting point. And then we're going to have to dive into these next ones. So we don't want to overextend ourselves just on curb ramps. And that's one reason why, like Trent said, that 25 years beyond the 6 years, 31 years total is reasonable. By no means do we suggest that we go out 100 years, but we might not be able to do more in a shorter time frame because we're going to start adding in these other facilities that we're going to start to bring into compliance.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Himes.
Yeah, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. This is going to be a big deal. Let me put it that way. At least that's my view of it in terms of keeping on a 25-year basis, 16 balls in the air annually and pulling it off in a timely and financially viable manner. And by the way, I think 25 years is a good target based on what you told me with the 31 years or whatever it is to meet. But it almost begs the question from a internal resource capability. you have something here that, to my mind, would justify almost a specialty. For example, a combo project manager, junior engineer, or whatever you want to call it, who's got a 25-year career in front of him, for sure. That would make a lot of sense. I just don't see this on a one-off basis 416 times. It would seem to me it would make a lot of sense if we say, hey, this is an ongoing thing. It's going to happen. We're sure it's going to happen. We have to make it happen. And instead of having the usual stop, start, whatever comes next type thing, no, we know these things are going to happen. Okay. So I think where I'm going with that is it seems to me in the budget discussion that almost needs to be an integral part of this, called how do we pull this off internally with this number of ramps being replaced per year, and all of the design, permitting, all the other work that goes with it, in addition to, contractor support and that type of thing. So just a comment.
Yeah, and I appreciate the comment. I want to recognize that we have 15, about just under 20 minutes left in this meeting. Of course,
Yep.
we have two other items to address. I want to say we will be, once this is adopted by City Council, we'll be putting into the annual budget a program for ADA compliance, and starting with curb ramps. And so what you're talking about, Council Member Hines, is a program. We could have one or how many ever staff dedicated to that program.
Okay.
I would like to just make a comment on the truncated dome discussion. I think that most of the people here know, I use a wheelchair, so I'm very, I have firsthand knowledge of curb cuts, sidewalks, and the cast iron, for whatever reason, is a much smoother, it's smoother to roll across the cast iron truncated domes than it is the yellow ones for some reason. And so I think that and I've mentioned this before, so I hope that the future councils keep that in mind, and that the standard becomes the cast iron for the ease of comfortability of use, and for the less maintenance. I think that those are both good reasons to go with the cast iron.
I would agree with you. Plus, the yellow ones are bumpy and the rest aren't.
Well, they all have the same standard dimensions on the bumps, but
Oh, okay.
Trent, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that our current policy is, maybe it needs to be solidified, but is to have cast iron truncated domes wherever we have new crossings or new intersections, or rebuilding complete intersections, but where we're replacing individual ones that have yellow, we'll put back yellow.
That's correct. That's how we're approaching retrofit work right now. New work, we're planning to go with the cast iron.
Okay.
Why would you not go with if you're retrofitting something, go with the cast iron?
As we will, as long as we're retrofitting every single one, but what we don't want is a patchwork of one or two in the intersection being yellow and the rest cast iron.
Okay.
So we're looking at a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Well, and hopefully the future council, I think Councilmember Heim brought up a good point, that this is going to be an ongoing, every year there's going to be money put to this, and it might be a lot more cost effective for the city to consider hiring some staff person that is going to be that's going to be their job, as Councilmember Hines pointed out, for the next 25 years. And then somebody could become very proficient at designing and going out to bid for those, and hopefully maybe the city crews can start doing some of this work in the future too, if we gear up for that. So thank you folks very much for that presentation. If there's no
Thank you.
other questions by council, I guess we'll move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jennifer. Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, so our next item of business is the Ansett Human Powered Craft Public Storage Fees.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Franich. As you may recall, the Parks Commission and the mayor have been developing rental terms and fees for the future public storage facility at Ansett Waterfront Park. The draft rental terms were presented to the Public Works Committee back in May, at your May meeting. And at that point, staff indicated we'd be coming back to the Public Works Committee and then eventually City Council with draft fees for the boat storage. So here we are at this meeting, providing the draft fees. And there was a memo that was provided for this meeting, and included in that memo was a draft table of fees. So I'm going to bring up that draft table and share it on my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Okay, so this should be what you received, I hope. What we've got here, I'm just gonna go through this real quick and we can get into details in a minute. We've got fees for 6-month rental periods. The rental periods for this facility for the public are going to be 6 months periods. So we're looking to have fees paid in 6-month periods for the entire rental period. There are different fees based on the different boat types that are going to be stored. And there's different fees for city residents and non-city residents. There is also a fee for lockers, and there's a general application fee, just so we can have the staff available to process those fees. And so at this point, I would like to pause and see if there's any comments from the committee members on these fees that are being proposed. And on the right side, as you can see, there's some examples of if people were going to be providing certain lengths of boats, that's what you could expect to pay for that period. Councilmember Himes.
Yeah, just in a very short summary, what's the underlying basis for these fees? Is it square footage you're consuming? What are you doing here? That's the first question. And then the second question is, if you put it on an equivalent, let's say, square footage basis, how does this compare with what the Canoe and Kayak Club is getting on their portion of the facility? That question is bound to come up for sure at some point in the future.
Yeah, good question. It is generally, it's not directly based on square footage, but generally based on square footage. Stand-up paddle boards, about 11 feet long, they can be stored with and take up more square footage. And then canoes and kayaks. So generally, though not precisely, based on square footage. Now, how does it compare to Gig Harbor Canoe and Kayak Race Team? Let me do a quick calculation. I thought that the public side was paying equivalent to what the Canoe and Kayak Race Team, because right now the Canoe and Kayak Race Team's monthly rental rate, I think without excise tax, is in the $1,700 a month. But let me double check that here while we're talking. Okay, Council Member Wook.
And what is this? What are these funds going towards?
They go into the Parks Operating Fund, which is essentially general fund, and be paying back, because that's where the rental fees would be, or sorry, the storage rack fees would be paid out of. And that's also where the salaries will come out of for managing these funds, because the theory is that once a year also, we have to manage it. We have to manage the building itself. We have to do maintenance on the building, garage doors, locks, you name it, repairs to the storage rack system, and then cleaning of the facility also.
And is this fund, are these funds going to be enough to pay for that altogether, or will more funds be needed from somewhere else?
It should be enough to pay for those expenses.
Thank you.
And what is early in the discussion, it was a staggering of the periods of time, the 6 months. So what are the months, the breakdown of the months? From when to when?
The first period would be January through the end of July. Second period would be July through the end of the year. Just real
So
quick math. Oh, sorry.
It seems like the July through December, the people that would be taking advantage of this, seems like they would be, and I know there's no way, it seems like those are more prime months than the January through July.
Okay. I think that's a good comment to make. We're not, the discussion here today isn't on the terms themselves, but I think that, Mayor, you've heard that comment. We can discuss that, but yes, Mayor.
We've tried to make it simple, and mostly what we're going to do is learn after the first couple of years. But I think these are reasonable, and we just tried to make them consistent throughout the year. I mean, again, it's a lottery system.
And so I want to go back to the question of is the proposed public storage fees, how does that correlate to the canoe and kayak race teams fees? So let's just say our average 6-month rate per boat is $220 for 6 months. That, and let's say we're going to use an average of, we think we can store 40 boats in the boat storage building. That equates out to roughly just under $1,500 a month. So the public side is getting a little better rate than the canoe and kayak race team side, based on $220 a boat per 6-month period.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Is there, and I don't know if you're prepared to talk about this or not, but what about the security and the liability? Is there some indemnification that somebody's going to sign, or?
Yes, all of that's in there. Indemnification will be signed. We're working with RMSA and we're working with the city attorney's office to make sure that the hold harmless clauses are in there, and insurance coverages are identified, or hold harmless and indemnification is identified.
Councilmember Himes?
Yeah, do we have any feel for customer reaction to these rates? That is, they think it's a great deal. I'll have my submission in tomorrow. Or wow, this thing's pretty pricey. Maybe I'll think twice about this.
We don't have any customer reactions yet. I think it's going to be something where, as the mayor said, we're going to iron this out as we move forward. But I can tell you these rates are comparable to the other rates we're looking at, or we've seen Bainbridge Island, City of Kenmore, Tacoma Metro Parks.
Okay.
I mean, when you look at, I'll just do real quick, $200 for a stand-up paddleboard, 6 months, that's $33 a month.
Yeah, great. I was going to say, do your market research up in Gig Harbor North, where the garages, well, first of all, there's 2 trucks in the driveway because there's no room in the garage, and see who's got paddle boards and stuff up there. I'm sure that's a real fertile area for
Sure.
marketing these types of things.
Sure. Maybe I should market my SUP storage rack I have at my garage. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Of course, you guys will have this in front of you, but so appreciate your feedback on that. Right now, the next steps are to go forward to the full city council with these proposed rates or fee schedule at either the November 22nd or December 13th meeting. I think we're going to try and get it on the November 22nd meeting because we also have first reading of an ordinance for community paddlers dock rules at that meeting. But the overall project schedule for the site and how this is going to correlate into the public storage facilities and the community paddlers dock. I wanted to go through that real quick. We're looking at having community paddlers dock completed in a ribbon cutting in early 2022. We want to get the storage racks on order in December and install them by the time we get a ribbon cutting in early 2022. I recognize that that won't meet the January through July timeframe, and so we'll have to prorate that first 6-month period. But it'll be we'll be able to wrap all this up and have everything ready to go, I think, in time for that ribbon cutting.
Good.
Could you provide me and maybe the rest of the committee with the comparisons that you use from those other jurisdictions you mentioned, their charges?
The actual amounts or just the jurisdiction list again?
Well, the amounts that what the other jurisdictions are charging.
I don't have those in front of me. I can look those up.
Well, yeah, no, I don't need them right now. I was just wondering if you could just, sometime later today or tomorrow, just forward an email.
I'll try and get that to that tomorrow.
As we will be asked, is my guess.
On a separate note, and I don't mind you sharing this with council, I did talk to Dave Rodebach today, and we are going to get you a complete new packet for the budget for the 22nd. So, you will get, in a day or two, we're going to show you the corrections that we've done, that you've asked us to do in the budget, so that you can double check that those are all right. And then by the time we have the council meeting on the 22nd, you'll get a whole new packet, a whole new booklet with all the changes in there instead of just sections of it. So I just wanted to give you that reassurance.
But thank you for making that happen, Mayor.
I
It
wasn't
didn't
going
seem
to take
like-
ownership of that last night. It wasn't my job, but it didn't. It did need to. I tried to say that's what we did last year. I guess we've done 4 different things each year. So, but it's good to have a whole complete packet for when you're going to go ahead. And we're going to have it. We're going to have it printed before the end of the year too. We're not going to wait till January, like was mentioned last night. We're going to, after you pass it, we're going to print it. So.
Okay.
Just one last thing on the ANSH storage fees. I just want to make sure that the council's aware, finance and public works are working closely together to implement an automatic payment system, or sorry, an online payment system for these fees, so that we don't have to take checks, people don't have to come in. It's all going to be online, and we can watch them clear online and check those off. So anyway,
Great.
we're working on that. Finance is really helping us out with that, and we think that'll be a good addition to our system and use it elsewhere in the city too.
Great.
And Jeff, I'm assuming that the costs that are associated with the maintenance and the things that you mentioned, that will be captured somewhere in Cartograph. So somebody, these rates seem a little low to me. That's why I was asking about the other jurisdictions. So the future council in the years to come will be able to know exactly what it's costing to operate and maintain the facility in light of the revenues that are coming in.
Yes, most of the cost to operate and maintain the facility will be captured, not all of it, but we will be able to capture most of it in Cartograph. Yeah.
All right, thank
Yep.
you.
Yep, and just, like I said, I'll try and get that list of other jurisdictions' comparable rates, but gut feeling is that our rates are probably a little higher than the other jurisdictions, but I say that just in the conversations the mayor and I had putting together that list. We started off a little lower, and I think that was because the comparables were a little lower and we increased it a little bit. Maybe it was the non-city residents, I can't remember exactly, but we'll get that to you.
Well,
Is
that's
it
fine.
worthwhile? Is it worthwhile to have a yearly automatic increase like a CRI or something?
I don't know, I would, because we're just starting with this year, I would like to leave it a little more flexible, where if we come back and we say, look, right now we're anticipating that we're going to get overwhelmed with the amount of requests.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're going to have 40, maybe 50 spots, and I can imagine we're going to get 100 requests or something. So maybe it's not necessarily fair to just let the market dictate price. but I would say at first, let's try and figure out, are we way too cheap, way too expensive? And address it the next year and then just keep refining it. And then maybe we very well could get to a point where it's just a cost of living adjustment from that point forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our third item of business is the Burnham Ridge Sewer and Water Utility Extension Agreement.
Yes, thank you. As we know, the city is required to provide water and sewer utility services within its service areas. And these service areas are different for each utility. The water service area is outlined in the water system plan, and it's adopted by the city, the State Department of Health, and managed by the Pierce County Coordinated Water System Plan. So Pierce County jumps in and says, okay, water purveyor A, water purveyor B, who's serving this property? And so they try and fill in gaps wherever one purveyor is not providing and another purveyor is not providing, and say, who's going to provide these parcels? So that's part how the water service area is established. And then for water, we could supply, as a city, we could supply water to residents in the city limits. We can provide water to residents in the UGA, and we can provide water to residents in unincorporated Pierce County. We're not restricted to just do it in the city limits or the UGA. Now that's different from sewer. Sewer, we're by state code or state requirements, growth management, we're only allowed to provide sewer service either in city limits or in the UGA. And sewer service is regulated by the city's comprehensive plan and identified by the city's comprehensive plan and the Growth Management Act, and to some extent, Department of Ecology. As noted in this utility extension agreement, the site is located in both, the site is located in the urban growth area, and it's in our water service area. So we are allowed to provide them water and sewer. They Rush Residential, they are requesting 20 water connections, ERUs, and 20 sewer ERUs. We have capacity to provide both those water and sewer ERUs. That said, we need to be checking with Rush because they only requested 20 water ERUs for the 20 residential lots. Typically, they would require at least one additional ERU for an irrigation meter. So we need to be checking with that. So before it comes to City Council, we'll get that clarified. But right now, staff has reviewed their hydraulic reports and say that they're accurate and we have capacity. And I just wanted, there's a map that was provided in the memo that showed where the site was located. I'm just going to share my screen real quick and look at it in our GIS system. And you can see, hopefully, and I apologize, I was going to highlight it, but here I'll highlight it right now. Oops, that's in the way. But this is the parcel we're talking about. Zoom in a little bit more. Right now, there's, I think, 2 residents on it, but our water and sewer lines are right in Burnham Drive, right in front of the site. So easy to connect to.
Where is this exactly, Jeff? What's that parking lot across the street? Is that the undeveloped?
That's McCormick Creek lot, or phase 3, I believe. Let me zoom out again. Let me highlight the parcel itself. Sorry, just a quick second. I thought I had done this, but apparently I didn't.
Just north of the Cushman Trail.
Yeah, just north.
Yeah, it's one parcel north of the new North Creek plat. So it's between SR 16 and Burnham Drive, north of North Creek plat. And I think this map shows North Creek plat.
Mhm.
Yeah, make sure that's
Needs to be developed lots. Yeah.
Yeah, let me minimize that. I'll scroll a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the Little League. Here's McCormick Creek phase 3, and here's the north side of the North Creek plat. And that's the property we're looking at here.
And how many acres is that?
Let me look. Sorry. According to the county, 7 acres.
And they're having 20 units on there?
Correct, 20 units. Yep. I'm sure it will look very similar in topography and layout to the North Creek plat.
Ugh.
So, so that's the request from Rush Residential for those to serve water and sewer to those 20 lots.
And they handle all of the costs to make this hookup.
They handle all of the costs. They pay 1.5 times the general facilities charge and 1.5 times the monthly sewer rates.
Okay.
And
Now,
water rates.
the capacity that you mentioned that we've got contained, this is capacity now. Looking forward to worst case expansion within the plan, we still have capacity. In other words, if you take Katrina's zoning stuff and throw in the max density, okay,
Well, what we have is our wastewater comprehensive plan has identified the city urban growth area at full build out based off of 2 key assumptions. One, zoning and densities stay as they are prescribed today.
yep,
And 2, nutrient limits, or sorry, I shouldn't say nutrient limits, just maybe be more general. Discharge limits at the treatment plant don't change. So based on those 2 assumptions, we are designed already today to be able to treat all wastewater at full build out of the UGA limits.
Well, we're expecting different regulations on nutrients. Is that correct?
We are expecting that, but we can't plan on that. But we are, and we're doing other improvements for that. But if as the Department of Ecology's permit changes, we will have to adjust.
Adjust the housing
Okay.
units that are allowed in the city. Is that what you're saying? Or that we can process?
Well, we either reduce the number of ERUs we can treat, or we improve our treatment process to be able to treat those same number of ERUs.
And we still have going to go out and want 2025 for additional water rights. Is that what?
At some point in the near future, we are going to be starting that process, like we said, in 2025. That'll be, by the way, on the discussion in the December meeting. But we will be starting in, I think, 2025 it was, in the near future, I'll say, to start to acquire additional water rights. And it's just a planning exercise to make sure we have enough. We're not getting ready to enter into a water moratorium like we did. Goodness, I don't remember when that was, if that was 2004 or 2003. But it was a while ago. The city did have a water moratorium, no additional water connections because we were running out of water rights. But we're not there yet. But we're planning ahead so we don't get into that position.
Well, am I wrong? I've been under the assumption that we're not even close to running out of ERUs with our existing water supply.
Yeah, we're not close, but I think we have. It's one of the exercises I need to take the time to do, and I haven't had the time to do, but I will be doing at the beginning of the year, is to go through and compare how much water we're flowing and how much water we have available to reserve. We have last checked a year ago, we had capacity, and based on growth projections, it was, I think it was identified in the water system plan, we were at least 10 years out. I don't remember. Trent, does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah, it does. I don't have the numbers either. At my fingertips.
I mean, I have some concerns. If we're going for more water rights, aren't the other water companies going for more water rights as well?
They might be, but the city has been the area where the most growth potential has been. Washington Water might have to, I don't know their water rights status. I could look that up or ask them for their planning documents. But I haven't heard that they are.
Question
Okay.
on that. If people in our UGA tie into our sewer and then they pay, twice the fee, I think, do they automatically get the water, or is that an option with that?
No, it all depends on if they're in our water service area or someone else's.
So they could tie into our city in our UGA, but then still seek a private water company.
Yes, we
Okay.
even have, we have residents who are in the city limits tie into our sewer and they're not in our water service area.
Right.
Probably,
Um,
probably gonna depend on the presence of another drought. Will just about do it, I think. At least based on my own personal experience, called the sprinkler systems in some of these areas consume a heck of a lot more water than you could ever get in showers and everything else. I mean, we're talking thousands of cubic feet per month increases with those systems. So
Yeah.
I would think that there may be a run on the market here if this drought thing continues. This year, in fact, I think that's what prompted a lot of discussion this year. I'm surprised that it didn't get any worse than it did.
well,
We'll see.
um,
We'll see.
Is there still that program available, Jeff, that back when you were talking about that moratorium where you could pay to move up the list on the water, trying to secure more water? Is that program?
No, I don't think it exists anymore. I think that was just something that was in existence back in the early 2000s. I
Okay.
think everybody has to go through the same process now, I believe, but as we proceed forward, we will be bringing on a new water rights attorney and they will be able to provide us that guidance.
So,
So, is it possible to restrict sprinklers?
Yeah, that's happened before. That happened in Michigan. Called, you can only sprinkle during certain times. By the way, it's the time bounded consumption of water is the trick. The pressure drops and the fire department didn't have enough water pressure to put out a fire. That was the starting point of the limits there. But yeah, they actually had things like you can only, depending on your house number, you can only water on odd days or even days, for example. Between these hours, they even specified the hours you could water. So it's not so much total capacity as it is certain peak points of the day. Like early morning, everybody takes a shower, most people do. And boy, the water consumption, you can see the spikes in the water consumption versus time curves. But yeah, you can do that. You can do that. In fact, that's what happened down here in the one with Washington Water. That's exactly what they did. Of course, they had a bit of an outcry with that, but you can do it.
So can we limit the ability to have sprinklers in new builds?
I'm sorry, can we limit the ability to have sprinklers in new construction?
Yes.
I don't think we can limit the ability to add sprinklers. I think we can just limit the watering times. We can do that through one of two ways. We could just set our code up so it's always in effect. From example, May 1st through September 30th, you could say, here's your watering schedule, or we could do it based on emergency declaration, which we've come very close to in this city in my tenure here, but not done yet.
So we can't say you can no longer put in sprinklers in your yard?
I don't think we can, but we
well,
can.
I mean, if somebody wanted, then people could just divert to a above ground hose and a sprinkler. So
So that's not helpful, is it?
Yeah.
It's not
Well-
helpful with saving water.
Yeah.
just one last question on this Burnham project. You said they're paying 1.5 times. This isn't in the city limits?
No, it's not. No, if it was in the city
Yeah.
limits, we wouldn't have a utility extension agreement. I can bring up that map again and I'll show you where the city limits line is.
It's on the documents that you sent us.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah. Burnham Drive is in the city limits, but this property is not. North Creek Plat is in the city limits, but this property is not. It's really close.
That's a really irregular, because I'm looking at the map that shows the parcel, city boundary, urban growth area. So I'm assuming the old Dan Root's property is in the city limits, and then what the portion of that was kind of strange how that boundary line is, coming off Highway 16, that's not,
Yeah.
or that is, I guess.
Well, can you see the red line on my screen?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the city limit line. So the correction center on the east side or on the west side, and then this little swath of land. This is where the annexation study that community development will address some of these items.
yeah, it's a very odd boundary line there.
It is. I don't claim to understand how it was created. I just know that's the way it is.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Does any of the council members have any more questions on this?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
So I guess we'll, what are we gonna get, a brief capital improvement plan review?
Yeah, I was just going to go through tier 1 if that's okay.
That's fine. That's fine. And by the way, I would like to have about a 2-minute discussion on the Wagner Way, Walacha Drive interchange or intersection thing.
All right. So again, we've highlighted the changes that we made. So you can see this first page, no highlights. So no changes to this. Onto the second page, HVAC assessment, we pushed that out. Have not been able to get to that yet, but hopefully will be. On to page 3, we're just at the construction. That was the pedestrian crosswalks. We just are extending our construction closeout to the end of the month that had said we would be done by now, and we're not. So just doing paperwork and closeout. Okay. On to page 4, emergency water intertie. That this project is going to be presented at the December Public Works Committee meeting. We need to have discussions on some of the language and options we have for intertying with the 2 water purveyors that are at the north end. It's the Canterwood Water System that's managed by Peninsula Light Company and the Washington Water System. They are not able to provide as much fire flow as we thought, and so we're coming to the Public Works Committee in December to talk about that. And then on to the last page, page 5, wastewater treatment plant digester upgrades. You saw that in the budget. We're moving that out. We're going to have design completed by the end of the year, but we won't have construction. So we had to move that money out, and it's shown here. Utility rate study, we weren't able to get through the stormwater revenue study, and so we've had to move out the utility rate study itself into next year. Any questions on the current active tier 1 project list? Okay. All right. You have all the rest of them. I wasn't going to go through them because there's very few changes, but that's what I had for this report.
Good.
And if you just want to hold on 1 second, Councilmember Himes, do we have any public comment, Maureen?
No public comment.
Okay. So you wanted to take a few minutes, Councilmember Himes?
Yeah. I sent all of you an email last Thursday on this item, and this is addressing the project to do improvements to the Walacha Drive, Wagner Way intersection. Okay, and thinking about that a little bit last week, I thought, boy, we've got 2 projects now on Walacha Drive to improve traffic flow on either side of State Route 16, basically through the interchange area there. And that is it's a very congested area, at least based on what I've seen and based on the traffic models I've seen. That's a tight area. And we've got these 2 projects in there to improve the flow. A slip lane coming off the exit of the westbound 16 onto Walacha, and then the slip lane on the entrance ramp to 16 westbound, okay, on the other side, on the Pioneer side. So we're doing a lot there, trying to do a lot to get that last couple of vehicles across that crossover there and get them through that area. And the more I thought about it, hey, a traffic signal, when you stop traffic, you're obviously cutting flow back a little bit, okay? And it seemed counterintuitive to me to be saying, hey, we're gonna put in these two to improve it, and then we're gonna put in a stoplight and it's gonna stop things to get these people who are making a left-hand turn off of Wagner Way onto Walacha to get them on there. So the first thing that came to mind is, do we have a traffic study that shows what that's gonna do to the overall traffic flow on Walacha Drive? Okay, and I think the answer, Jeff, was no, we don't have a recent one. I'm not recalling one in recent history.
Correct. We do not. Correct.
And this was, my terminology for it is this was a legacy project. Jeff had experience with this thing going back, it was 2013, 2014, something like that. This has been around for a while. So one of the things I think that needs to take place is, one, I think we do need an analysis that, and I'm talking like a TSI type of analysis, where it not only shows that intersection, but shows the effect on the other two intersections on Walacha going over 16. That is on the west side, on the east side, called what do those look like? And I think that needs to precede this thing. Right now, the assumption is that that is going to be a light there. It's going to be a stoplight in the costs and the timing and a few other things. So what I'm proposing here is that we do that analysis and confirm that, one, either a stoplight is doable without messing up the traffic flow significantly on Walacha, okay, and pretty much make it conditional on that. And if it does, there's always a handy roundabout that will solve this problem quite nicely. You don't have to stop traffic flow coming off of or come on off of Wagner Way onto Walacha, okay, that want to come back over the overpass, for example. It handles that problem very nicely. You get on, turn to your right, and basically go around the circle 180 degrees and away you go. There you are. So that's it. That's where I'm at. I guess I'd be interested in reaction. And I know there's a grant application out there. In fact, I think it's like 900,000 of the 1.3 million is assumed to be a federal grant. And I don't know what the timing is on that and how sensitive it is to the use of this legacy stoplight project to make it all work.
So I was, he's brought this up to me before, Jeff. What is your thought on that with the roundabout?
Well, two things. One, Councilor Himes, did you include me on that email, or Mo on that email?
Yeah, I sent a copy to you. Yeah.
Okay. Mo, did you get that? I didn't seem to get that, but
Okay.
okay.
I'm sorry I didn't. Doggone it, I left you out.
Okay.
I apologize. I
Okay.
sent it to Kit and to Tony and to the other members of the Public Works Committee, but I didn't send it to you. I should have.
Okay. So here are my thoughts on this, and Trent, if you have other thoughts, let me know. But we did consider, I want to say 3 years ago, maybe it was 4 years ago, having a study at this intersection to put that in the budget to consider a roundabout here, and it was immediately rejected at that time. The roundabout idea is a good one in terms of keeping traffic flowing. The signal at Highway 16, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. The signal at the Highway 16 interchange has conduit laid all the way over to the signal at Hunt Street so that we can interconnect those two so the signals can all talk. That would mean if we did put a signal at Wagner and Walacha, it could communicate with the other signals.
So you can synchronize those lights.
You can to some degree. You can't make them perfect, but you can synchronize them to some degree. Just the way Kimball is synchronized to the east side of Highway 16, the Kimball signal is. So that would benefit the signal installation if we were, and so the other approach is to look at, if we were to put a roundabout in here, how would the platoons of vehicles that are coming from each of the other traffic signals impact the operation of the roundabout? General roundabout theory, though maybe Trent's more up on it than I am, states that you don't want to put roundabouts in between a series of signals, because you're going to get these platoons of traffic, groupings of traffic from the signals coming into the roundabouts, and will really make a huge amount of traffic all of a sudden plug up that roundabout or control that roundabout. So it's usually discouraged to put a roundabout adjacent to two signals or in between two signals. Now, this site has a little bit of a distance between those signals. It's not a couple blocks away. It's a little more than that. And so it could be a viable solution to, or a discussion point, to have a study performed to do some traffic modeling and see how a roundabout could be effective here, or if it wouldn't be effective here due to the locations of the signals. Now, I'm going to measure something. I haven't done this ahead of time. I wasn't aware, like I said, of this, but I'm just going to measure the right of way here roughly.
You know, one thing as you do this, you know, thinking of trucks, I mean, this is a lot of people's way to get to Fox Island and Raft Island. And so you could have trucks have a lot of problems with the roundabout. I mean, they can go over it, but doesn't mean that, but they'll stop the whole roundabout to do that.
This is a big area. This is this would be a good size roundabout, I think.
Yeah, it would have to be a decent sized roundabout. You probably saw on my screen, it only measures about 100 feet across.
Yeah.
And that's fairly, I don't know, that's not a micro or mini roundabout, but it's not as big as the roundabouts that we have on either side of Highway 16 at Burnham Drive. We'd have to, I think it'd be best, if there's any interest in putting a roundabout in here, I think it would be best to have a study, because we need to look at traffic volumes, and we need to look at signal timing and the anticipated traffic volumes coming down Wagner Way.
Yep.
With the development that's coming in.
I would agree with that. In fact, the other thing I would throw in is the opportunity, and I know it was in somebody's plan, if I remember correctly, of expanding that Walacha to 4 lanes going across there, which I think would even make even more sense with a roundabout, because now you could have 2 lanes going through that roundabout quite easily, I think, if you expanded that. So as I agree with the study, I think the study should be done no matter what. But also looking forward, if we're serious about potentially 4 lanes in the future, okay? And I realize you'd probably have to do redo the overpass to make that make any sense whatsoever. That thing is highly constricted. But I think that needs to be done to get a good handle on this. Otherwise, this may be a short, almost a throwaway type project with a light. I can't imagine a 4-lane road there with a stoplight on it. That's what we had down at, you're absolutely right, down at Point Fosdick. And we had to get really tricky. You guys did a great job in terms of syncing the lights and adding more slip lanes. In fact, you were up to 6 lanes, if I remember correctly, down there at the Point Fosdick light. You could play a lot of games down there in terms of traffic not stacking up.
So I just wanted to show, before we end this discussion here, that this is what's in the current 2022 preliminary budget for Walacha at Wagner. As Councilmember Heim alluded, there's $900,000 identified through federal grant. That was one of the 5 asks that the city made to Washington, D.C. this year.
Well,
If we,
if you want, the only way to really bring any kind of real resolution to the horrendous traffic problem that whole area encompasses is that the overpass needs to be 4 lanes. That's just a 2-lane overpass there just does not handle the volume. So anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah.
well, I can say that right now, it's not on, oh, well, we don't have a project identified in the transportation element or on the tip that expands that overpass. And if we did, it would be rough numbers, $40–50 million project.
Wow.
And I doubt the state would participate. Maybe they would, but
Well, anyway, yeah, that'll be for future councils to.
So all the more reason for a study to see if a roundabout would be a better choice than a light. I agree with Councilmember Himes that we do need a study in this area.
Yeah, we do need to study on it. But and I think the other thing is, I think there's general agreement, we need to study also with the funding that's in there right now. A study can be contained for 2022, I assume.
if you wanted to put it within the design and permitting, yes, but if there is interest to have a study completed to consider the impacts to the intersection based on signalizing or installing a roundabout, I would think that it should be identified in the budget narrative itself so that it could be solidified.
Would I'm also assuming the construction, if we did the study, the construction phase would slip into 2023, at least in part.
Yes, it absolutely would.
Well, for sure, it was a roundabout, it would slip for sure, but even with a signalization, I assume some
If we
chunk
did-
of that's going to slip.
Yeah, it would.
Okay. I think that needs to be identified, this is, and you're right. Make sure it's worded that way in the budget proposal. That is, that a study comes first, then comes the design of either a light system or a roundabout, and then go from there.
Yep.
Okay. Is there general agreement on that? I see Jenny, you're nodding your head. Jim, you're on board here?
Uh,
Or you
Yeah.
holding out for a 4-lane bridge?
Well, I think a study might not be a bad idea, but the ultimate solution is, anyway.
Studies are tricky. Remember the last study we did? On how they substantiate everything. So good luck with that, everyone.
I just, you're going, as the mayor said, council's going to receive a final draft of the narratives of the 2022 objectives. End of this week, you said, Mayor? Or just before the 22nd meeting, I think?
Yeah, hope the final for the budget.
Yeah,
Hopefully they'll get it. Hopefully we can get it out tomorrow afternoon, late tomorrow
Okay.
afternoon. So
okay, so hopefully, but take a look at that, and then if there's interest, address it at the second reading to have it modified.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't say it today, and it's too late for me to make that change.
we're tomorrow morning, we're trying to get the council's changes to the department heads. So they look at each of their own department first before we send it on to council.
But right now, it just says intersection improvements, correct?
Correct.
It's not locking you down to a stoplight or a roundabout or anything. It just says improvements.
It just says improvements, but the design and permitting for 150 will not pay for design and permitting and a study.
Right. Got it. Okay. Okay. By the way, how much would we have to add for the study? Any idea?
15,000, 20,000, I don't know.
Okay.
One last thing, Jeff, I know we're beyond our time limit here. And I've mentioned to you this several times. And I don't know if it's already happened because you said it happens in the fall or winter. The timing of the westbound Point Fosdick signal it's 15 seconds.
No, and Councilmember French, I've been targeting that, looking at that. Trent and I've had a discussion about this. We're doing Trent, I don't know if you want to jump in, but we're doing a complete conversation with WashDOT about that signal and a couple other signals and the timing of those, because there's a couple other things that WashDOT needs to tweak. But I totally agree with you that's a pretty short cycle and it's northbound Point Fosdick onto westbound Olympic.
So if you're
Yes,
having the conversation with them, what about a flashing light from the Olympic overpass onto 16 north, west?
At that existing signal,
Yes.
that wouldn't work because of the conflicting signal heads that would be installed and how they would orient with the oncoming traffic. Because you've got 2 lanes that are going eastbound heading to Highway 16.
Right. So from turning, because sometimes there's no traffic on Olympic going across the overpass, but there are people stopping there trying to get on 16, and
Yeah,
it would not be appropriate to have a flashing light there.
For a couple of reasons. One of them is because you have 2 lanes turning left, and
Okay.
that's not allowed.
All right. Thank you.
well, you do know what I'm talking about, Jeff.
I do, yeah. It's as if you're coming from the library, heading north on Point Fosdick and turning left to go toward Harbor Greens or whatever, Veterans Park.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years ago, I thought they were going to increase that. And now with Metropolitan Market open, and it's just happened to me just yesterday. I wasn't that far back in the queue. I was just at a little bit past the Safeway entrance, and that damn light, it cycles quick. It's not evacuating traffic out of those lanes. So
Yeah, so that's what Trent and his crew are going to be talking with WashDOT about. If you haven't already, I don't know.
Lane roundabout will solve that, Jim.
I'm sorry, three lane, you said, Councilmember Rhymes, 3 lanes?
Two.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 2.5, 2.5. I'll go halfway.
all right. Well, thank you very much. And Maureen, I would just like to thank you very much for a very nice packet with the
Yep.
tab deals on there. And your minutes are still, they're not like they used to be, but under what you're constrained to do, I just really appreciate the effort that you put into this.
Yeah,
Oh,
very good.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Very good. Very detailed, I might add,
Yes.
compared to other ones. Thank you.
Okay, so our next meeting is December 14th. With that, just need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And I'll send you a
Opposed?
copy of that email I sent, Jeff. Sorry I
Thank
left
you.
you off.
So
No worries.
Bob and Jim, could you stay on for a second? It doesn't have anything to do with this meeting.